watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us. A group of journalists at Alternative Digitalk in Makinde Division were planning to launch a book at the end of this month. It is titled Komanyoko Politics, Liars and Accomplices and Unsowing the Mustard Seed. Now, upon, putting that information on social media, well, security agencies pounced on it. And on Thursday last week, this group of 9 journalists were arrested. But the latest information we are getting indicates that 6 of them were actually released. That is yesterday on Tuesday. 3 of them are still in jail. We are talking about the leader, Norman Tumuhimbise. We are talking about Farida Bikobere and also Arnold Mukose. In that regard, I do have the executive director for the Uganda Human Rights Network for Journalists, Robert Sempala, ready to give us more details on this case. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Romeo.
Indeed. Without mincing any words, let's get into the nitty-gritties of this case. What should the viewers know about it?
Yeah, they should know that these guys were arrested when their media house in Makinde was raided, cordoned off, and everybody on site was arrested. Their vehicle impounded, the compound vehicle, and all the cameras and everything on site was, taken by security. They were mean-looking guys, armed, of course, and later we learned that it was a combination of security forces. We did not know what crimes that were being labeled against them, but mostly we think because of the book that is being talked about. But that even being the case, we criticize the approach because these are people who have a fixed place of work. You can always summon them to the CID for interrogations. And also, not everybody around is an accomplice because now 9 people, 6 men and 3 ladies. You do not think all of them connived to commit a crime, an alleged crime. But I think it was a very haphazard way of doing work for me on the part of the security. And then if you think they have committed a crime, you keep them beyond the mandatory 48 hours incommunicado, because we did everything that day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We're looking all over for these guys because we are representing them as Human Rights Network for Journalists Uganda, but also their families have a right to access, their people being in cells. That didn't happen, and most worryingly, we went to CMI, they deny knowledge of these arrests. We called the spokesperson of the army, our friend Kraije says, I'm not even aware. We call the spokesperson of the police, we call other people in the police headquarters, they say, we're not aware this thing has happened. We call SIU, say we're not aware. So literally everybody was, denying knowledge of the arrest of a group of many people, mostly journalists, and that really gave us very uncomfortable times. We didn't know how far we could walk to, because we went to every place they kept mentioning to us, but we couldn't have a trace of our colleagues. And that's not the first time even, because it has happened to many. Just recently we were in court at Buganda Road, over 2 journalists that were charged with, computer misuse. This guy, Pedersen of the drone media, and Mugarura of Bilal FM, they disappeared for 2 weeks, but they're being tortured because when they resurfaced, they had torture marks all over their bodies, and they were charged in courts of law. So we're wondering, even if you already have, convicted these people and passed a sentence of torturing them, so what are you looking for? What remedies are you looking for in courts of law?
The Fountain of Honor has come out one too many times, Robert Sempala, and said torture shouldn't be used in his circles of security. But then the security officers have continued to rough up people left, right, and center, including the messengers. Why do you think this continues to happen? And
he has massaged them because he has not taken any stand position apart from making a statement. A president should not lament like us. If you're Fountain of Honor, if you're a commander-in-chief of the armed forces, you do not even, you make decisions that are punitive in nature. Anything short of that, you just know that he played to the gallery. He wanted to please some people, and around that time, I think we were going for the Universal Periodic Review, and countries were going to review our human rights records and pass recommendations to us. Maybe it was in the interest of that, but also we certainly wanted to impress the international community that was really on our case for torturing so many people as a country, and maybe that motivated him to make those statements. But actually, he has not walked the talk in any way. Parliament has not systematically discussed human rights violations, and in courts of law, you see people that are really on the verge of losing their lives being brought to court, and they're made to plead to charges, and you wonder what it is that they're looking for.
Robert, let's talk about precedence, because because this is not the first time this is happening. During the 2020 campaigns, many people were being abducted left, right, and center. Journalists were actually speaking about the situation. Many were not, you know, against it. Others, you know, were against it. But then the Precedence, Ashraf Kassiria during that time was also injured during that chaos, and many other journalists in that case. Let's talk about what is happening here. Why are we seeing a Precedence? We also went to the Human Rights Office. We were beaten. Cliff Wamala, you remember, was injured at the hands of Lieutenant Colonel Franklin Namanya, aka Napoleon. Why are we seeing this bad Precedence taking center stage?
I think, Robbie, it's a very difficult question for me, because the very people that are supposed to protect these journalists in the line of duty are those that are turning their guns against them. You ably mentioned the ugly incident at the UN offices. That's the epitome of international diplomacy.
Indeed.
But if you can have the guts to go and attack a person just in the face of all those cameras, then you have Jim Akena, who is working all by himself and descended on by 5 military men and beating him even as he raises his hands. And the fountain of honor says they told me he was trying to steal a camera. We don't know from who. And okay, where were the suspects if indeed he was trying to steal somebody's camera? Then you have Ashraf Kassiria. There was an attempt on his life 3 times because he was deployed to cover an opposition camp. And actually most of the victims have been ones that are covering the opposition-related activities. Now we have colleagues that were beaten at the Deputy Speaker's residence in Koro recently, and they're all on the run because security wants to arrest them, you know, on trapped-up charges. One of them is Chitata. They're saying he tried to grab a gun from a man who kicked him in his private parts, who went for him. And these are people who had already received these journalists in a calm environment. They introduced themselves to them, but after gathering all the information, now they wanted to get hold of the information so that it does not trickle down to the wider publics. And I think there is a very big problem in the authorities trying to reprimand the errants. Because if you say it's a one-off, what are you doing to these errant officers? Because it should be punitive in nature. Something must be done. Short of that, we'll continue seeing these things happen a lot, and us are already running in the trenches trying to rescue our colleagues. They're taken to court, and there is no conclusive and successful prosecution. Charges are dropped. Now we have seen this guy Pidison of the drone tortured 3 times, and no successful prosecution happens. They let alone say, okay, we think we are going to drop this. Can we negotiate? Can we have you know, those amicable settlements? After torturing people, so where are we even running to? The other time, we got a confession from the CDF, General David Mohos, then that we are sorry, this will never happen, but things are continuing to happen. The police has completely run away from you know, even meeting people to talk to them about what is happening at the hands of the officers. So you literally have journalists to fend for themselves, and some, mysteriously, some bosses are even very comfortably quiet. They're not you know, raising their voices because their voices are louder than ours. They own media houses, they own this industry, they have massively invested in it. So I think the missing link are the bosses. Well, the media bosses. The media
They've
bosses.
been silent about
Well,
it.
sometimes they go behind the curtains and, you know, dine and wine and, you know, get assurances, but things happen again. What they do is to prevail over the victim journalists. Don't go to court. Don't do this. Let's talk this through. And so you indirectly coercing a journalist into an amicable settlement, and that is very bad for them. They're bleeding inside.
So
but
you
supposed
do
to
have
put
a
on
viewer
smile.
who is watching Morning at NTV and is wondering, are these journalists sometimes provocative and calling this kind of attention to themselves, or are they simply doing their jobs? Let's go back to the title of the book. The Komanyoko politics, liars and
liars and accomplices.
And also sowing the mustard seed.
seed.
Remember, President Museveni has a book called Sowing the Mustard Seed.
Yes.
Are some journalists being provocative, or are we simply doing our job?
You know, there's this inherent right called freedom of expression. In a civilized society, every leader must be open to criticism. Where somebody criticizes you and you think it's not right, counter them with the same intellectual discourse. Don't use might over reason, because this game will never end if you're going to use might over reason. This is, one intellectually engages you and then you draw guns at them. So it's not a fair battle. It's not leading anywhere. It's not civilized. It's, you know, it is really backward for me to say the least. Because now you're the complainant, you are the judge, you are everything. Yeah.
Yes.
Where are they going to get justice from? After holding people in communicado, then you're saying, okay, we're rushing them to court. Because we hear that the 6 they were released yesterday in the night, they confiscated their phones, their gadgets, they didn't even have transport, they are just left there to fend for themselves. And the 3 that are remaining in, Mukose, Norman and Farida are going to be taken to court today. So we are running around to know which court they are going to be presented to so that we can defend them. We already had prepared sureties for all of the 9. So we're just running around for a matter that would have been, you know, resolved amicably. And they're drawing even a lot of support for the books. I don't know if there is even connivance in this matter, in this case. Because for people who did not even know about liars and accomplices,
and so in the master seat,
so everybody will be on the lookout for a book to read.
But books like this one was so rife during the Donald Trump administration. You and I know very well that they called him a baby left, right, and center, especially the liberals. They wrote so many books.
They called him a jerry can.
They made a killing, but none of them went to jail.
None of them went to jail.
Otherwise, half of the Americans would be in jail after abusing or writing books on Donald Trump, meaning the First Amendment within this country is really strong. What does that say about the Constitution within this country? Are the military people, is this government still following the Constitution, or is the Constitution still guiding this government, or are they simply, you know, doing their own thing?
In addition to Donald Trump as the most powerful president in the world, generally the U.S. presidents are the most powerful by many standards, was criticized even at a press conference one time, and I had an exchange with a journalist, but he didn't throw them into jail.
Indeed.
They walked away, the CNN people. He said, you're disgraced to your media house, you're this and that, but it's an exchange of words.
What does it say about the Constitution right here in Uganda, where you have Erukiraba Shaija Kakwenza having to flee to Rwanda and having to, you know, connect to Germany in exile, where you have journalists being roughed up, being jailed, where you have people like Romeo Busiku being threatened, left, right, and center? What does that say on freedom of speech within the Constitution?
I think it is facing very difficult times. And many journalists have now run to everywhere. They're now running out of the country. And that is too ugly, because that used to characterize the past governments, where people would run out of their countries because they have done what they are professionally supposed to do. And many of them are in Canada and other places. We always receive these complaints. We always relocate journalists from their homes for fear of being arrested and, you know, kidnapped and held in communicado. And that's very ugly of the state of affairs, especially within the media industry.
And of course, these are issues that took center stage during the Amin era. We saw them during the Obote II era. Are we dealing with a dictatorship, Robert Sempala? Are we back to those heinous days?
Whether dictatorship or not, I must say that these are very trying times, and nobody should think they are safe. And as long as you are worth the salt of being a journalist who can investigate, who can hold a leader accountable, who can you know, check those gross abuses of power and offices, you certainly are within the firing range. So it's not for me to scare journalists, but to warn them that the waters, the tides are so high.
Well, of course, Robert Sempala, some of us knew of the precarious nature of the profession. When we joined, I told my father at the age of 8 I wanted to become a journalist. He said they'll kill you, because at the time he was working for CID. He knew the government he was working for. So he said, I'm not even going to pay for your school fees to go to the university, simply because I can't fund it for your death. So I had to do it on my own. Yes. So let's look to some of the journalists out there who are working under such precarious conditions. What kind of message do you have for them right now?
Mine is that, well, they're doing an impactful job. That's why people are going against them.
Indeed.
Yes, not to encourage them, but to push them down. Also to warn them that the spaces are increasingly shrinking, and there are so many manifestations pointing to that. So once you're in there, you must know how to kind of behave around very hostile environs. You have to, you know, map out who is for us, who is not for us, and accordingly know how to navigate around. Else you do not just move anyhow and think because you're a journalist, you have these rights, that everybody will understand them and respect them to the dot. Not all journalists that have been beaten have gone beyond, you know, the principles of the law. Some are innocently beaten and they can't be beating people. somebody said we can't be beating you to help you from danger. And that
IGP
person has, yes, IGP, and has since gone silent on things that happen to journalists. Today, we went to open up a case of a journalist, Chitata, who was kicked in his private parts, and the police declined. Instead, they opened another case of threatening violence. And the other one has got glaring evidence, because there was even a video to that effect. But they said we can't open that, because you even see that the people who are supposed to protect journalists are the ones standing against them, so they even fear their bosses, because the bosses are not speaking out. And it's even worrying us that there is mysterious silence. It's either connivance, commission, or something that we really need to understand in the deeper sense.
Indeed.
So we are deeply concerned. But I want to encourage the media to stay firm, but also invite the bosses, yeah, because we know them. They're very articulate people. They're very outspoken if it comes to issues that concern them. So they should equally be concerned about the plight of the foot soldiers, the people who go to the field to fish for stories, to certain newsrooms. You can't have a big gap between the boardroom and the newsroom and think things are okay. You know, we should do an introspection.
My brother, Robert Sempala, if the journalists are being attacked, where does that leave the voiceless?
The voiceless have to fend for themselves at some point, but also it's reading the media of the muscle that is supposed to hold leaders to account, and you know, to expose, to play a watchdog role. For those that have the muscle to do it, please do not waver, because it's a noble job that you're doing for this country.
Thank you.
Without the media, certainly we will be towing in darkness everything that we're doing.
World War III would befall the world before actually they even know that something is happening. But Morning at NTV was able to tell the world that in December that something was happening. Russia was planning to attack Ukraine, and that is good news. So on this case moving forward, yes, I do understand that 2 applications were filed, one at Nakawa Chief Magistrates Court on Monday.
Yes.
You also filed a case that is in the High Court on Tuesday.
Yes.
So what is the way forward?
The way forward was to get an order to the security bosses to release, produce unconditionally the suspects, whether dead or alive. And we filed yesterday, our colleagues led by Aaron Kiza filed in the Nakawa Court. Certainly we wanted to add another voice to what we already had on Monday, because the High Court has a national jurisdiction, much as the Nakawa one has a limited one. The captors are always very, very sharp. You could have an order just that is effective within Nakawa, and then they take the suspects away from that jurisdiction. That's why we went to the High Court, but also to add some people like this, same way, who we thought were deeply involved in this. We hope that these journalists will not, no matter what security does, they do not reach a level of coming to appear before the courts of law to answer to the continued detention incommunicado of suspects. They normally release them. Sometimes they are tortured, but they throw them within the police stations, and then they are brought to court and charged.
Robert Sempala, in 2020, 50 journalists were killed. In 2021, 55 journalists were killed. This year alone, 8 journalists were killed in Mexico, and others were killed within Ukraine and other areas. We're talking about 27 journalists being killed since the start of the year. Right here in Uganda, we're only dealing with arrests, people being subjected to jail time. So the President points to the fact that in the near future, we could also be suffering from or subjected to gun attacks in that regard. So what kind of advice do you have for the journalists out there who's watching? Do we decide to stay off the sensitive subjects and shut up, or do we continue pushing, forward? What do we do?
Ashraf Kasri nearly died.
Indeed.
Because, he kissed the grave. Jimmy Akena nearly died because of those frantic beatings on his head and so much. He was disabled. Andrew Ranga nearly died. So we're not seeing Kasamani Isaac of Daily Monitor nearly died when they shot at him at Murago roundabout. So we have seen many attempts of killing journalists, and we can't say we are any safer because we have not seen journalists being buried after being killed. But there are those that have killed, that have died mysteriously. We have 6 cases that remain unresolved.
Mysterious robberies and so forth that couldn't be connected.
Yes, they break into your house, and many things have
You're
happened.
Going back home, they strangle you in a taxi. That happened to a journalist at New Vision.
At New Vision,
he was strangled in a taxi.
There's a guy who used to work with the Red Pepper, who had dreads, died in Cheband, and his body found on the roadside. There are many. There's one in Kasese that was found in a generator room.
How do we expedite a good working environment with the central government to do away with the ills we are seeing? Robert, that is the last question.
Okay, we continue engaging the people within the government and outside of government to impress it upon them that this is a noble profession. It's not against the state. It is supposed to do what it is exactly doing. And since we have freedom of expression, we have rights of the journalists, we have so many things that provide for this job, and people have a right to do their professions. So the government should don't appreciate and live and let live. That's the only way out. If you can certainly think these are enemies, they'll continue approaching them with unnecessary force that we see today. But if there is positivity on the way they're looking at journalists, then the situation will be very amiable.
Thank you so much, Robert Sempala, because if we leave this unattended to, it will actually embolden these people to go for more journalists. Just like Vladimir Putin, when he took over Crimea in 2014, they thought he was going to stop there until he continued. Now he's taking over the whole country. So when you see something terrible that is happening, stop it in its tracks, because it will offer a bad precedence whereby those bad individuals are emboldened to orchestrate more attacks. That's it for this conversation. Robert Sempala, the Executive Director, Uganda Human Rights Network for Journalists, thank you so much for fighting for us and also coming through on Morning at 10 TV to speak to us on this pertinent subject.
Thank you, Romeo. Thank you very much.
And indeed to you, all the journalists in the world, please continue pushing forward unabated. Do not relent in your resolve to actually disseminate information that goes a long way in improving the lives of the 7.9 billion people who roam this earth. That's it for this conversation right here on Morning at 10 TV. To you, the kings, the queens, the boys and girls who are celebrating their birthdays, would like to wish you a joyous one. But COVID-19 is still pretty much in existence, so wear a face mask, social distance, and have a blessed morning.
Introducing the itel A58. Get yourself one from any itel or MTN outlet. itel A58, more than bigger.
When you buy Rigo Paints Premium Emulsions, open and pick out the Gata Onera coupon. Go to Messages, type Gata, leave a space, type coupon codes in capital letters and send to 6585 to redeem your instant airtime.